Coming to you from South Florida, the Casey Ingram Show. Now, here's Casey Ingram Unleashed.
See him in the shadows, Ingram calls the shots. Speaking truth to power where the rebels lost. Forces rising, anger crackles through the air. Casey's being unleashed, raising hell without a care.
Welcome to the Casey Ingram Show, where we break down the headlines, ask the tough questions, and bring you real conversations that matter right here on the Treasure Coast and beyond. I'm Casey Ingram, and let's get into it. So, what if I were to tell you that Florida could eliminate property taxes entirely? Is it real reform or political fantasy? Today, I'm joined by Representative Monique Miller. She is the architect behind the very bold proposal that was passed in the House this past session. Monique Miller is a Republican member of the Florida House representing District 33 in Brevard County. Elected in 2024, she quickly emerged as a bold voice on tax reform and government accountability. With a background as a cybersecurity and IT executive, Miller brings real-world private sector experience to Tallahassee, approaching policy with a focus on efficiency, transparency, and results. She has taken a leading role in high-profile efforts to reduce the tax burden on Florida homeowners, positioning herself at the center of one of the state's most closely watched policy debates. Known for her direct approach and willingness to challenge the status quo, Miller continues to build a reputation as a results-driven legislator focused on protecting taxpayers and strengthening Florida's economic future. Welcome to the show, Representative Miller. I appreciate you coming on here today. We're recording on a Sunday afternoon, so you're taking time out of your beautiful weekend to talk with us.
Well, thanks, Casey. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Well, you didn't come from a political background. You did come from cybersecurity and the private sector. How does that shape things for something this big? This is a huge tax reform bill, folks. I know you heard about it. We're going to go over it a little more in depth in this interview, but what a big challenge to take on for your first session.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's no joke. So I would say that the opportunity cost for people in my world, in my industry, because we really don't get to keep our jobs when we go to Tallahassee, it's very difficult to find something that would be a part-time gig in my world. So being able to step aside from that is a pretty big opportunity cost. And one of the things that I committed to myself and my family is if I'm going to be away from you guys and I'm going to give up all of my career for this period of time, I'm going to go up there to do big things. And every one of the bills that I run, I'm extremely proud to say they're varied in subject matter, but they're always big things. I had a bill on nuclear energy this year, but I didn't know that this would end up being the nuclear bill of the year.
It truly has been. When did you first say property taxes have to go?
So, I mean, I've been a big proponent for it from the beginning. I think that there's a moral issue to having the cost of services that are rendered to a homeowner are not based largely on anything that has to do with the value of the house. So the very nature of it is an immoral foundation. So for me, I thought it was something that was just wrong. And it also obfuscates the actual costs. So we want to be able to have that transparency so you know exactly what you're paying for the services that you get. Right now, you're just sort of paying this lump sum into, general revenue, and then you never really know where it goes. When things are broken down in like non-ad valorem taxes that are on your bill, it might be a fee for, trash pickup, and you know exactly what you're paying for that service.
Representative Miller, I kind of broke some of that down for the local Tri-County. I know you're up in Brevard. I'm down here in Martin. So I kind of looked at Martin, St. Lucie, and Palm Beach counties. And, it's interesting. It goes to schools, right? It goes to county government, fire rescue, healthcare district, library, children's services, could even go to waste management or trash pickup. But what I found astounding is here in Martin County, 40% of our taxes are going to county government. St. Lucie County is 21%, Palm Beach County is 26%. So let's break it down a little bit, Representative Miller. When you're passing or had proposed this bill, and actually it's a joint resolution, I want to jump into that real quick. Joint resolution means it's going to go to, or it should go if passed through the legislature and both House and the Senate agree, then it's up to the voters. It's going to go on the ballot. That's the joint resolution.
Yeah. And it bypasses the governor, it goes directly to the Secretary of State to be placed on the ballot. And it requires a 3/5 vote in each house, in each chamber, excuse me. So the Senate and the House both have to have 3/5 of their members vote for it.
And you got that accomplished in the House. Then it went to the Senate, where they didn't even let it go out of committee.
It went, yep, it was sitting there, never got anywhere.
Which was their voice, their vote. I mean, they did that purposefully. They did that purposely so it would not go any further. And I think I want to try and address, because I know a lot of people have a lot of questions about the bill. The Senate is saying, well, we don't know how things are going to be funded, so we're just not going to do anything, which isn't an answer. There's a citizen group, Representative Miller, that has just on April 6th filed to get enough signatures to put on the ballot to completely eliminate the property tax with absolutely no safeguards. It's actually kind of a little bit more of a dangerous way where we're going to go into your bill. You had protections to protect our fire departments, to protect our schools, to protect our police departments. The bill they're proposing, because the Senate is sitting on their hands, if it gets passed, there are no protections. So I'm hoping the Senate takes note of that, and maybe, maybe there's a possibility of a special session to look at it this year, or at least bring it back next year.
And Casey, I got to tell you, I'm so happy to see a group of citizens that are speaking up on this and really getting finally engaged, because there are dozens and dozens of high-paid lobbyists that are on the other side of this issue. Every single one of the cities, every single one of the counties, for the most part, has a lobbyist in Tallahassee looking out for their interest. And there just isn't anybody except a handful of us that are up there looking out for the people's interest. And so I'm glad that they are raising up a voice and saying this is something that we really want. And I hope that helps spark a little bit more excitement in the Senate.
I hope it does too. It shows that people truly are concerned. We really want that change. Florida has been leading the way under Governor DeSantis around the country to bring up, economic opportunities. I saw a chart come out the other day. Florida's gained more wealth than the next 5 states combined since COVID, and that was $21 billion. And with that, our property taxes are enormously high. Our insurance costs are enormously high.
That's right.
So it's so wonderful to take the lead here and say, what can we do for our Florida residents? So Representative Miller, can you break down what this proposal is to do step by step?
Absolutely. So initially, my proposal had been to phase this out over time. It was initially designed to phase this out over 10 years. And what it does is it gets rid of all non-school property taxes. So everything that is not going to a school today that just goes to the other side would be completely eliminated. And it requires that the local government still maintains a certain level of funding for the current level of funding or the previous year's funding for public safety. So for fire and for police services. So education, fire, and safety are all covered. And the rest of that, is something that each community needs to start to figure out for themselves how they're going to fund that without.
So where does the money come from to fund the schools, the fire department, the police?
So the school tax for ad valorem taxes will still continue. We're only taking care of half of it with this bill. So that will be untouched for now. You have my word that will be touched later, because their spending is out of control too, and we will address it. But it takes a little bit more thoughtful approach, I think, on the school side of things. So they still get ad valorem taxes from non-residential. So anybody who doesn't have a homestead, if you have a secondary home, if you have a business, those are all ad valorem taxes that are still collected by the community, and that will go to paying for police services, for example. Fire rescue is a little bit more flexible. For some reason, there is a court finding that says that fire rescue can be allocated to each home. And so that's why you can do that with a little bit more flexibility. You don't have the ability to do that with law enforcement costs. So some of those tax dollars today, the ad valorem taxes, are very important to paying for law enforcement. And we're just saying you need to make sure that that's what you're funding first with your ad valorem taxes that you're still collecting.
So this bill only applies to homesteaded
Correct.
personal properties. Okay. And there is enough funding through the non-homesteaded to continue to fund those, because obviously all their money would go into those particular areas, then the school, the police, the fire.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody is suggesting that it's going to be easy. I think every single one of these communities is going to have to go through an exercise. And there's no two communities that are the same. I have the Barrier Island in my district in Brevard County, where the small towns are like, we want to keep our fire department. We don't want to join our fire department to the county. Great. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. If your citizens find that a priority, you will figure out a way to do an assessment or to do, whatever it is that's right for your group of folks that are paying the taxes, to give them the services that are appropriate for them and what they want to pay for those. In communities like where I live in Palm Bay, I guarantee you people do not want to pay one more dime than they have to pay. I live in a very blue collar community, and we're proud of that, but we don't need a lot of frills. And so we're going to have to start looking at getting very lean on our government services. And that's I think totally appropriate. It turned out 5 years ago, they could do all of that they're doing today with half the money. So it's absolutely shocking to me how much this has gone up. And you alluded to it. We've had an incredible influx of wealth in our communities. We have business investments going on here. And one of the side effects of having great policies is that your property values go up. Unfortunately, these communities saw that as a payday. And so they've taken all of those taxes. They've never once said, nope, you keep your money. They, for the most part, are saying, nope, we just, when the property tax goes up, we don't take our millages down and we're just going to leave it the same. And it sounds like you're paying the same amount in taxes, but you're not. You're actually getting penalized for having more value in your home.
Absolutely. We've kind of looked at some of this locally, how much the budget has went up. Even though there's so much more money coming in, the budget has never remained the same or been lowered. It's astounding the percentage that it's went up, at least here in Martin County. So very true there. And I think you kind of touched on it here a little bit. That's one concern folks have. Will this have an effect on housing? Because we had the big, boom of everybody moving to Florida. Because frankly, during COVID, thank goodness under Governor DeSantis' leadership, it was open for business and people did come here because of that. Will people move here even more because of our, eliminating a property tax? And in effect, that'll make the home values go up even higher and make it unaffordable for Floridians.
I don't think it will. The realtors were very excited about this, but I think it's really because it gives some relief to homeowners. And I think that the biggest thing I'm hearing from everybody is that affordability is what comes number one in Florida. That's the issue everybody cares about the most. This was a way to provide some immediate relief to our Florida taxpayers, the people that are the residents of Florida. And it makes sense. And the other thing that it does is it gives those new homeowners an opportunity to get in a little bit easier. The longer it takes for kids to buy a house, the longer it takes for them to have kids, and that longer it takes for them to adopt conservative values. So all of these things matter to the future of the state of Florida. So the sooner we can get kids into a home, the better it is for our communities, because it'll make them responsible taxpayers that are conservative in nature.
One thing I found interesting was the phasing that you proposed. So tell me, who benefits the most from this proposal? Is it going to be the large property owners or, an average Floridian that might be 250 or 500 anymore? Used to be, $100,000 house, but now 250, 500.
So I'll tell you a little story. We carried the bill through as a phased out approach to it instead of doing it all at once. And I was astonished. I did so many radio interviews, so many television interviews, talked to people all over the state, and I kept getting feedback. And the feedback I got was, you're just trying to put us like frogs in the pot and get us used to having fewer and fewer services until you take them all away. Why don't you just rip off the Band-Aid? And so at the end, I was like, look, if we're going to do it, I guess let's just do it. And so I got rid of the 10-year phase out because might as well just get ready to go do it all at once right now. It seemed like people didn't have a preference one way or the other. The taxpayers certainly wanted it immediately up front. Initially, that phased out approach, most Florida homeowners, like the median price of a home, it was about $350,000. So it would have given you $100,000 a year. By the end of 3 years, you were pretty much
100%.
eliminated anyway. So it was about the same thing. However, just based on the feedback I got, if it doesn't matter one way or the other, we might as well give it all now. So we amended the bill on the House floor, and that the version that actually passed eliminates all of it immediately.
Fantastic. I'm glad you cleared that up because I've heard the phasing so much. I didn't realize the phasing was eliminated on that. So here, day one, here we go. Now, what about renters? Do they get left out of the benefit from this?
So there were a number of proposals that the House put forward. It wasn't just one in isolation. And I think a little bit of the conversation got lost because mine was the only one that made it across the line. I think there has to be a little bit more to what we end up as our final policy. And I know that the House or the Senate has committed to discussing this in special session. I know the governor, he says he's had a plan for a year and a half. We're all on pins and needles to know what that plan might be. But he's also committed to doing something, working with both chambers in a special session. And whatever we end up with, I think is going to have something that addresses like commercial properties to make sure that we're not shifting a tax burden from those homesteaded properties to our commercial properties. There was one of the proposals that we had that went through several committees did exactly that. I think that's an important part of whatever we end up with to make sure that we're not ending up hurting, renters.
I think that's the biggest question everybody wants and fears. Are we just being shifted to pay it in another way?
I never underestimate the power of local government to find a way to get your money.
So, right. And with that, that's another question. Will that be up to each, municipality, each village, each city, each county to try and figure out how to make up for that budget shortfall?
Yeah, and I'm working very closely with them. So one of the groups that was very vocal in this whole process, and again, I just want to reiterate, all these groups are using taxpayer dollars to go hire lobbyists or paying associations to go up and represent their interests to make sure that they get your money. There's nobody representing the taxpayer but us, right? So one of the groups was the Association of Counties, and they had published a report that said, the world's going to end." It was a Chicken Little scenario that we can't possibly exist without all of this. Look at all the cities that'll go bankrupt tomorrow or whatever. And it was clearly an over exaggeration of it. But what it does, I think, mandate is that we have this back and forth dialogue. I have with all of the counties and cities in my district throughout this entire process, but we need to broaden that conversation. They had listed a number of state mandates that are probably unfunded mandates that through legislation over many, many years we have imposed on our local governments. I think it's a great time for us to go and look at some of those and say, do these actually do any good? Because I can tell you there's not a lot of government that makes a lot of sense and does a lot of good. So if there's opportunities to get rid of some of those and lower the overall tax burden for us, I think that's a great exercise we all need to go through. That every city, every county has to get ready for some version of, property tax elimination and be prepared to, tighten our belts, just like every Florida family is having to do right now.
It's groundbreaking legislation. It could really change the way, Floridians live. I mean, as I said before, even our insurance prices are so expensive. So if we can get some sort of relief, this is a game changer, and it has to be done right. So I guess, what were some ideas? You've talked with a lot of people, Representative Miller, a lot of municipalities and leaders. What are some ideas of how to make up for that shortfall? I'd like to see cuts, but we all know cuts aren't going to make up for it completely. So are they talking about, let's do local taxes more? I don't know.
Again, I'm going to say it. Look, 5 years ago, with exactly the amount of money they have today, in fact, with with less money than they will have after these taxes are gone. After we remove this ad valorem tax from homesteaded properties, they will have more money than they did 5 years ago to deliver the same services to their communities. We're not talking about some massive amount of money we're taking away from them. We're really talking about a lot of government spending that's run amok. And I think we need to rein it back in and reprioritize. What's right for one community is not the same as it is for another. So I can't speak to that on broad terms. But one of the things that we could address, for example, in conforming language, so we do have to come up with a conforming bill for this to kind of help facilitate the implementation of it. And that's normal with any sort of citizen-led initiative. So anytime there's a citizen-led ballot referendum that does not have conforming language until after it passes, we're doing it that way as well. So that conforming language could have something that specifies, all right, we're going to take the handcuffs off of some of the dollars that you're receiving today so that you can have more flexibility with those dollars to, for example, to pay for law enforcement, make sure that that's covered right up front. But, law enforcement, so public safety and infrastructure, that is the core mission of local government. And we are so far unmoored from that. It's not even funny.
Well, Florida instituted, the Doge investigations, but they didn't do every county. I wish it was straight across the board, every county. And I wish there was some teeth to it to make counties kind of get in line with some of their spending. And I guess
I tried.
Did you?
I carried the CFO's bill, the FAFO bill, the Florida Agency for Fiscal Oversight. And it would have really put some teeth around it, just would have codified his program and laws so that he could continue doing these. And it put some teeth in it so that if you didn't participate in it, if you didn't give the information that was required, we could withhold some state funding and make sure that everybody is giving the transparency that we expect as taxpayers.
Amen, Representative Miller. That's what I love to see when somebody's elected to go to Tallahassee to represent us. And I appreciate you bringing that up. Obviously, it got defeated. Was it a hard pushback on it, or?
No, you know what? Actually, it wasn't entirely defeated. So it ended up going into a conforming bill for the most part. What they decided is that they felt like this needed to be legislative oversight and not Department of Finance. So that I'm actually was okay with that. I think it makes sense as long as somebody is able to go. We have JLAC audits that are available to us as the Joint Legislative Committee for auditing like local governments. And we as legislators can go in and request an audit on one of our cities or counties, but those were primarily operational audits. And this would expand its ability to really look into the fiscal responsibilities of these of our local governments as well. So if that continues, I don't know where it ends up. It's going to end up in the budget discussions because it's a different kind of bill.
Okay. So
So yeah,
jumping back to our property tax, eliminating that, what's the biggest risk to Floridians if it gets passed?
they'll have more money.
I like that risk.
The biggest risk is that local governments look, honest to God, I wrote an article today. I mean, for Florida today, it was just in the paper today about my first term in office. And what I said is, it's a heck of a lot more work than anybody has any idea. And many of our local governments are run by, citizen led or part time folks. It's a huge commitment to actually sit down, dig in, and do the hard work of finding places to save money. It's easy to take you and treat you like an ATM and just get more when your property values go up. But we either do it now or we do it when the next time that there's, heaven forbid, a market crash like there was in 2008, and it almost wiped out some of our local governments. By doing it in this way, we're actually doing it in a much more responsible fashion.
Agree with that. And I was just going to bring up that crash because it seems like everybody had to tighten their belts and it was very tough for our local governments. But then when the money started coming in, as you said when we started at the top of this interview, they kept it. There was never any rebate. There was never any break for the actual homeowners. They just keep spending more and more and more instead of trying to keep that tightened belt and looking out for the taxpayers. So it'll be interesting. And, if this were to pass, what does Florida look like in 5 to 10 years?
I mean, I think the sky is the limit. I think we have some great candidates that are running for governor to take over for DeSantis when he's termed out here in November. And I think the sky's the limit. We have so much investment coming here. We have the space industry that is absolutely not just taking off. It is just way beyond anything I think any of us ever dreamed. I mean, I live on the Space Coast and there's a launch almost every day now. And it's just, I ran, like I said, I ran that nuclear bill because we have just only have to figure out the energy thing. And I think we will have just an incredible continued boom here in Florida. And I know we have to balance that with growth and, we don't need, traffic's getting bad for everyone. We do have to have a balanced approach to that. But when people want to live here, it's because of the policies you have. Number one policy is your tax policy. If people get to keep their money and reinvest it in the community, then things take off.
So as you see it today, what's next for this bill?
So I do know that we're going to have discussions during a special session. I don't know if it will be dedicated to property taxes. We're all looking forward to finding out how they're planning to do that. We do have a budget we need to finalize first. And so that'll be a top priority. And then there's also a special session that's already been called by the governor on redistricting, which is scheduled to start on the 20th of April. I know that the conversations are ongoing. I'm very much involved in that. And I've certainly given my feedback based on what I'm hearing here in the district and around the state on how I think we can make this a better approach to it. But I do expect to see something happen at some form or fashion. I just hope we can get the Senate across the line on something a little more bold than they were initially discussing.
We've covered this to the interview, but because we're coming to the end here, I just would like you to bullet point one more time. How is the funding going to be made up?
Okay, so I will tell you that there's a book that has tax law in Florida, and the first 10 chapters or something are all about the different taxing mechanisms that local governments have. So there are a million ways that they can tax. We're just taking one way away from them. And it's the one that's attached to your property value. And it makes sense that we find other ways to do this going forward. It will require that people tighten their belts in the short term, and they're going to have to figure this out for each community on their own. I am committed to providing some flexibility on how they are able to spend their tax dollars because we have compartmentalized things to the point where we really just have a lot of handcuffs on money that makes it more expensive for them to operate. And we could do a lot to help facilitate that. We can also do something in conforming language to help with other ways to pay for law enforcement, because I know that that's a big pain point for some of the rural and fiscally constrained communities. But I am absolutely convinced we can find a path forward. I am convinced we can do it without the state trying to subsidize any of those communities that are sort of the fiscally constrained. We do not want to turn them into the communist states of Florida. So they will not be subjects of the state of Florida. It's just everybody's going to have to dig in and work.
Now, speaking of that, Governor DeSantis set aside a one time, not something that's ongoing, but I think it was $300 million for the very underserved communities to just kind of get them over the first bump.
Yeah, if anybody can show me a government program that ended, I'd be happy to.
I can't. You're so right. I can't. But okay, so we'll see on that one.
Yeah.
And I think just the last way or the last question to wrap this up, will Floridians truly pay less or just pay differently? That's the big question
No,
everybody asks.
I honestly believe that we will end up paying less. I think this is going to be we're going to see that this will continue no matter which candidate on the Republican side wins for governor, and I'm convinced it will continue to hold the office. You are going to see a continued era of financial conservatism. And I think that with these policies will continue ongoing to make sure that we're not continuing to, and there's no appetite from people anymore. They're really frustrated. My county, for example, 10 years ago, we had just crossed the $1 billion line for our budget. We're now $2.6 billion. And I promise you, we aren't more than like, I don't know, I think it was 18% bigger.
Same thing down here.
Yeah.
We've had that same
There's
kind of
no
percentage. We've
justification.
grown 3%, but the budget has grown, 150%. What a
At 18%.
right. Don't take my figures to the bank right now. I do have those, but it is exaggerated it a bit, but it is a lot. The growth is not matching the budget expenditures at any means way, part form.
Yeah.
Representative Miller, I appreciate your time here again today. We'll wrap this up and let you get back to your wonderful Sunday afternoon, but it's a lot of good information. I'm excited to have that property tax bill come back. I'm actually hoping it'll come back in special session. I know it's not likely, but you never know.
I hope so.
Appreciate
There's
you.
a lot of work.
A lot of work went into it, and appreciate you taking the lead out there. It was exciting to see somebody. I know there's a lot of bills proposed, and the one that everybody ended up focusing in on and the one that made it to the floor and was voted yes in the House was yours.
And by the way, that's the second year in a row. So last year, I actually got rid of the tourist development tax and proposed giving that back in the form of a tax rebate as well. And that also made it across the House floor and died in the Senate. So
You're doing great things up there, and I'm sure your constituents are very happy to have you. I know I am down here in Martin County, even though you're not my personal representative. I know you're up there fighting for all of us and appreciate it. And again, Representative Miller, thank you. We'll have to do this again and kind of keep in touch as the bill gets reintroduced next session or what have you. And we'll watch that citizen group too over the summer. You never know.
absolutely.
So don't forget to follow the Casey Ingram Show on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube, or for more real talk you won't hear anywhere else. I'm Casey Ingram. Stay informed, stay engaged, and I'll see you in the next episode.